According to my clock, it's time to start. If anybody has a different clock, let me know. Well, the good Lord blessed us with another week that we can come together, study together, pray together, sing together, and fellowship together in Christ. We got some people I want to mention. I did get a sheet this time. Brother Ed Smith Peters is here, but he's been down. And Andy Peterson, he is waiting for surgery, MRI, something. Which is it? Both? Okay. At least I got it. Okay, Pat Gibson, Almeida, Cooper, Kazi Crane's been down. He's here today. We need to keep him in our prayers. Becky Stevens, Pat Thomas, Karen Sims, Sister Wood, Sharon Barone. How's Sister Barone? Good. We like good. And then there's Samuels, there's Carol Walliver, and there is the Mills, Tina Cheeks. I guess, did I pronounce that correctly? Sounds good? Okay, I don't want to offend anybody, but names can be pretty tricky. Like me, people can say, "How you doing, Bobby Woods?" And I say, "One stick." They look at me kind of crazy. I said, "No, my name is Wood. I'm just one, not Woods." Okay, Jewel Taylor, Brother Presley, I saw him last week, and we need to keep him in our prayers. Gloria, Ashley, Gloria, how you doing? We like good, good. And then, let's see, Joe and Janet Morone, how y'all doing back there?
We're doing fine. You can take us off that list.
Okay, somebody, you heard what he said. There she is. She said she'll take care of it. And Lydia Knox, and then the Hines, brother and sister Hines, he called me the other day. I think it was Wednesday, maybe Thursday, I forgot. And he told me that that Edwina has COVID again. I really feel sorry for those folks with it. Yes, ma'am.
Pat and Mary have COVID.
Pat and Mary's got what?
COVID.
No, what's going on? Sir? Well, anyway, listen, y'all be careful out there. I don't know what you, well, I tell you what, they gave me, last time I had it, they gave me some medicine, and I had another hint of COVID. I promise. I'll get it tomorrow now since I said that, but I haven't had it since I've taken that, or even a hint of it. Okay, I know Sister Thomason,
She's kind of under the weather, got a real bad cough.
yeah, sorry. That could be aggravating. You cough, 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 cough. Okay, who else that I may have overmissed? Sir, ma'am?
Yes, he's here.
Okay.
Anna's at home with a cold.
She is?
Mm-hmm.
Pneumonia again. Terrible. Okay. Anybody else we need to mention? Lead us in prayer, would you please?
Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this morning, a chance to come and study a portion of your word. You will be with each and every one of us this morning and be with the speakers. We just ask all these things in your name.
Amen. Okay, Galatians. I got a couple of things I want to review with you, a couple of things I mentioned. I wish that map was a little bigger, but maybe you can see that a little better. Can you see that any better? I got to find something that's larger, I guess. But anyway, we remember there's Antioch of Syria, which is over here. Antioch Pisidia, which is up here. There's Pisidia, and there's Antioch Syria. Both are important in Paul's missionary journey. Antioch Syria is where Paul left to go on his missionary journeys, except for the fourth one. And I think they hauled him out of there from Jerusalem, if I remember correctly. Is that right? Shake your head to it. That's right. They took him he appealed to Caesar, you remember? And he was in Jerusalem when they did that, and they shipped him out. They said if he had not appealed to Caesar, he would have left him to go, but he said, since you said it, you got to do it. So he shipped him off, and apparently he did a lot of good, even on that trip. All right, any questions? All right, we talked about Paul. What was Paul's name before it became Paul? That's right, Saul of Tarsus. And we talked about him where he lived up there in that part of the world that we're talking about. Apostleship, we talked about that. That Jesus died for our sins. We cannot overemphasize what Christ has done for us. We would have no hope without him. And we need to understand how crucial that is in our lives. And then we talked about he amazed at the church there, or the churches, I should say, in Galatia area or region, whichever you want to use. He was surprised, amazed that they so soon left the gospel of Christ. And why were they leaving? What influenced them to leave the gospel of Christ? False teachers, that's right. Listen, I remember, if you don't mind me giving this personal story. I remember at one congregation in the big, broad area here where I was preaching, we had really grown big time. I think we were up to 325 or so. And then things started happening. The elders didn't know about it. I didn't know about it. I mean, they just slipped right in and started teaching things that was contrary to the scriptures. And they got their influence by meeting in people's homes, having their own personal Bible study, influencing people to think in the direction of their false teaching. And let me tell you something. Elderships, every member should be aware of what's taking place. If I don't know someone very well and they invite me to their home, I got a big alarm going off my head. I probably will go just to see what happens. And we just need to be careful. They are very, very sick. In fact, didn't Paul say in chapter 2, these false teachers were brought in secretly? Under disguise, pretending that they were part of the church, and they weren't. So false teachers are slick. You have to be careful. All of us have to be careful. Okay, what else? Any thoughts on that before I go on? Then the warning of false teachers that we talked about. Then Paul stated the revelation he received from where he got it cannot come from man and so forth. He reminds the church of his former life. What kind of life did he have before he became a Christian? Pardon? He did that, but there was something else there too. What is it?
Studied under Gamaliel.
Gamaliel? That's right. He was probably a doctor of the Old Testament law. And I'm telling you, he knew the law. And so then he was so embedded in the Old Testament law, that he had a closed mind, and he persecuted the church. He thought the Christians, in all good conscience, he thought what he was doing was right. And from what I'm reading, I think he regretted what he did to the church before he became a Christian. That's my understanding. What's your understanding? None? Yes, sir. Here you go. Right here.
He said he was the chief among sinners. He was the one person. He was the one person in that whole region that could actually destroy the church. And that's why he said that. Because where his promise in the place, because he was so rooted in the old, that he could actually destroy the church by what he was doing.
Yeah, and let me say this. I was reading somebody, who was it? Bob Hinton, Brother Kaufman. Who was it? Somebody. I was reading 2 or 3 different people this week. And he said, you got to keep in mind that coming out of Judaism into Christianity, there's a slow transformation. There's a lot of things they hold on to and bring with you until you start studying and carefully looking at the scriptures. I was like that. Listen, let me tell you, I thank God that I had the privilege and the opportunity to go to Memphis School of Preaching. Telling you, a lot of the ideas that I had were in my thinking, and I was really raring to go, and found out what I was raring to go was not a good thing to do, you know? And God blessed me. And through the years, I've been fortunate to hold on to the truth of God. All right. What's your thoughts before we go on? We talked about that. Now, chapter 2, I want you to understand. I want to back up here. So, chapter 2 is divided in 2 sections. Okay, if you want to outline chapter 2, here's how I would outline it. Verses 1 through 10, and then verses 11 through 21. I think those are the main topics that are in this chapter. And by the way, if you keep the topics or keep the sections within they are without running over into something else, it will help you understand what Paul is trying to get across. And that's very essential as we go about doing this. If you got let me see, what is that famous Bible we don't get anymore? I got one in my Bible collection. No, the one before that. Dixon. If you got a Dixon, who said that? That's right. A Dixon has very good study helps. Thompson Chain Reference Bible is also a very good one. I had a brand new one one time, and a new convert was in one of the churches I work with from here, needed a Bible. And I said, here, take this one. And he did, and he appreciated it very much. Thompson Chain Reference Bible is a good one to help you study the Bible. It's good. So if you get it, they're not cheap. You can't get the Dixon anymore. They do not make it. I wish they did, but they don't make it. I have one copy. Reba has a copy, and those copies are going to stay in our house until we die. If you know what I mean. They're very, very important. Okay, that's the division of chapter 2. Okay? He starts out in chapter 2, reminding them that he said, after 14 years, I went again to Jerusalem. I think this one says, then after 14 years. One or two people that I read, a good friend of mine, he translated it, the word after, through 14 years. Well, I guess you say, through the 14 years I went back to Jerusalem, okay? That could be. But I like the word after. I think it makes it clearer or clarifies what has happened in this particular text. What thoughts do you have? By the way, when Paul went up to Jerusalem, he went by revelation. What does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. God told him to go. That's what it means. He didn't go on his own decision. God said, listen, I need you to go to Jerusalem. You go to Jerusalem, and he did in what he had. And communicated to them the gospel which I preached among the Gentiles, but privately to those who were of reputation. Now, I had a little vague idea who the people who were the reputation, and the more I study it, I am concluded, as many other brethren, like Brother Kaufman and the others, that the people of reputation here are dealing with the apostles, as to whom he's referring. They had a reputation in the church. Probably, I don't want to sound ugly, but probably, how would I say this? Important position in the church, and they did. But they were well known in the church there. And Paul going, he did not want to disrupt what was taking place in the church, and he wanted to show them what he was teaching and preaching was in harmony with what they are teaching. And I think that's good wisdom. I really do. I think, personally, I believe that every person who comes to the Monroe Church of Christ, that the elders should sit down and talk with them and find out from where they're coming and their understanding of what the New Testament teaches about the church, salvation, and so forth. What do you think about that? I think it has to be, or else you get things coming in without, like I said, down where I'm preached. We grew so fast we didn't realize what was taking place within the congregation. But you got to do that. So he said, talks about Titus. He said Titus was not circumcised. He was not compelled to circumcise. Why? Pardon? He was Greek. That's right. Who was in good judgment circumcised that Paul taught? Timothy. That's right. Now, what's the difference in Timothy and Titus? He was half Jew. That's right. But if you remember in Acts chapter 15, there came a problem that they were teaching, the Judaizing teachers, saying that, hey, even the Gentiles had to be circumcised and keep the law. You remember that? And he went through that, and they pointed out, Acts 15, 1 through 21 needs to be read and studied, but really before you get to this passage right here. I firmly believe Acts should come before we study the epistles. I really do. People need to know what's taking place in these texts. Okay, circumcision is, oh, by the way, Scott, he and I talked after class, and I didn't have a clear picture in what he was saying. I thought he was dividing the law or the Pentateuch from what he had in the rest of the Old Testament. He wasn't, but the Pentateuch is does come first. And emphasizing the Pentateuch over the rest is what some people try to do. And I agree with what you were saying, that the Pentateuch, by the way, he talks about keeping the law. You know, where was circumcision given in the first place? Abraham. Where is that found? Genesis, that's right, chapter 17. You'll find that the law of circumcision was given there, and they say that the Genesis is part of the law. That's what they do here in the New Testament. Genesis is part of the law, the Pentateuch. What's the Pentateuch? First 5 books of the what? Old Testament. What are those first 5 books? That's right. Somebody ran through them pretty quickly, but that's correct. And that's what they do here. They include circumcision, which was first, but it's also in Leviticus as well, and Exodus, as if you'll find going through the study of that particular subject. All right, here's what I want you to see. Watch this. Circumcision is used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in the book of Galatians. Now watch this. Uncircumcised is used in contrast with the word of circumcision in one place, and that's verse 13 of chapter 6. And then circumcised is used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So you got a bunch of times that this subject keeps coming up in the book of Galatians, and it's also in the book of Ephesians, also the book of Colossians. It keeps coming up, and the reason why it keeps coming up, they were embedded in their thinking of the Old Testament law, and they wanted to keep practicing the Old Testament law along with the New, and that doesn't blend in, doesn't work. Okay, we talked. I think in fact, he did. Brother Joe talked about Romans 7, dealing with the law there in that particular thing. That law is something that we don't want to. I don't want to live under. I refuse to live under the Old Testament law in this day. I couldn't live it. In fact, Paul says right here in just a few moments, said, Peter, why are you binding up on these Gentiles what the Jews couldn't even live? You binding up on them? And why are you doing that? All right, here we go. Let's see what else. We talked about contrary when they saw the gospel of uncircumcision had been committed to me at verse 7. And the gospel of uncircumcision was to Peter, for he who worked effectively in Peter for the apostleship to the circumcised also worked effectively in me toward the Gentiles. And when Cephas, James and Cephas and John, who seemed to be pillars of grace that they had been given to me, they were recognized that it was given to him, as they were saying here, and gave to me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, that we should go to the Gentiles and they should go to the circumcised. And I mark this. They desired only that we should remember what? I'm sorry? The poor. He said, we're already going to do that anyway. You know, there's no major change for us because we're already doing it. We had that mindset of taking care of the poor. Now, who are the poor? Pardon? Let me turn my phone off here. I'm getting these little ding-dings in my hair. I don't need that interrupting my teaching. Who are the poor? Who do you consider poor? Yes, sir. Orphans and widows. Thank you. Orphans and widows. That's correct. I would include them. But there are other people in the in the society and in the church that are poor. Listen, when I was coming up, we were sharecroppers. Anybody have any idea what it meant to be a sharecropper? Huh? Not easy, was it? Huh? It was tough. In fact, we would work for the person who owned the land on what they called a third and fourths, whatever that meant. We were supposed to get the bigger part, but guess who got the bigger part of the money? I do not make this up. The owner. Okay? And so I seen times when we had black-eyed peas to eat 3 times a day. That was it. 7 days a week. It was tough. I remember when we had bread and sugar water for dinner. You remember that? You know what's bread, homemade syrup? You put sugar in water and you boil it and you get it hot and you pour it over that and that was it. I'm telling you. I listen. And when they talked about the poor, we looked around looking for the poor. I'm serious. Listen, there are people out there that are very poor. And if I'm reading the Bible, in fact, I brought some notes in the Bible, both Old and New Testament, about, well, I said I did. I guess I left them. I brought the folder and left it on my desk. Sorry. Anyway, there are 197 times the poor is mentioned in the Bible. And we don't discuss that much anymore. Paul, he said that this is something that churches should be taking care of. In fact, when you jump over to Galatians chapter 6, and verse 10, he says, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good unto whom? All men, especially whom? The household of faith. We have a responsibility to take care of and help people. Now, I do want to remind you of 2 passages, or 2 thoughts. One passage says, the man who doesn't work does not what? Eat. Here's a person who's out here trying to do. And I think sometimes we ignore that passage. When people don't work, they just sponge off of everybody else in the church and whomever, use the church and trying to learn and be faithful and try to receive in the good graces what God has provided to the church. That's an abuse of helping. Secondly, there's a such thing called enabling. What does enabling mean? Help me out, class. What does that mean? What does enabling mean? You remember?
Helping someone to continue to make poor choices.
Ma'am?
Helping someone to continue to make poor choices in that context.
Dead on it. Thank you very much. Helping people who are making poor choices to continue to make poor choices. Basically, that's right. Here's a guy's making poor choices and you keep feeding him. They don't learn to do better. I think we should help people, and when they keep making the poor choices, we're going to say, look, here's your choice. The choice is not with the church anymore. We'll help you we'll help you find a job. May not be the job you want. It may be that they don't want a job at all. But we find out about that. But we need to help people who are struggling, who needs help, who are trying to help themselves. Does that make sense? Now there's a lot of passages like James. There's passages that Jesus points out in Matthew. Yes, sir.
Can you delineate a little more specific the difference between the responsibility of the church as far as in the society
that has poor people.
You talking about members and non-members?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If I'm reading Galatians chapter 6 and verse 10 and the other passage like James and 1 John that deals with this same subject, but I'm going to deal with Galatians 6. He says, as we have opportunity, what does that mean, as we have opportunity? They have the need and we have the goods. We have the things that will be able to help them. There may be that we can't help. We need to understand if we have it, we need to use it. Okay? That's what it means. You got it, and it comes along that they need it, we should help. As therefore we have the opportunity, we are to do good unto all men, I'm paraphrasing, especially the household of faith. We have a special duty to members of the church. But it may come a time when they abuse the church and we are enabling them to continue things, and we need to stop. Is that right or wrong? If I'm wrong, correct me. Show me how. Does that help any brother?
Well, sorry. Yes, sir. But does it mean that the church should have a specific objective of going to the community, identifying the poor, and being responsible, and maybe that's not the right word to use, being responsible to look after them?
Well, let me go back to Galatians 6, okay?
Okay, yeah.
As therefore we have opportunity. What does that mean? Pardon me? Somebody said something, I didn't hear it well. Kazi, was that you?
I'm looking for the verse, have found it, but the verse that I use in my duties in the church says that we're only to help the orphans and the widows that are part of the church.
Where do you find that?
I can't find it right this moment.
Out of the church funds.
Out of church funds. That's, yeah. Where is that verse? That's exactly what it says.
Brother Frank, do you know where it is? You know, that we're only to help. Are we saying that we're not to help people who are not members of the church? Is that what we're saying? No, we're not.
No.
Out of the church funds. Okay. How about help me out here? I need a little help. Can you help me with that? Yeah, out of the church funds. Sir?
Doesn't our help go further than just the church funds?
Yes, it does.
So we can't be limiting ourselves. When we have a brother or sister that's in trouble and in need, sometimes the church funds do not cover it. As a personal brother and sister in Christ, we have a responsibility.
Yes. Now, I've helped people in and out of the church. I didn't bring them to the church to get money. I helped them with what I could. An opportunity, as much money as I have, I help if I can. Okay? I used to help a lot, but I don't have the funds today that I had a few years ago, a year or two ago, because I don't work for the church anymore. You know that, right? I get my funds through Social Security, like most of us do. Yes.
Define for me more out of the church funds.
Well, here's the idea that I have heard, and I've read a lot of debates. I have. I read have a lot of them in my stuff. That's what I didn't throw away, give away, are my debates. And you can get the debates if you like online. And I forgot the name of the site, but you can get them and read. There are tons of them. I mean, tons of them. I think Jim Bulletin. How many know Jim Bulletin? Just Reba and myself. Who else? You know Jim Bulletin? Listen, he was one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. One of them. He's not the only one, but he was one of them. And he came up years ago. He studied the subject of helping only Christians and using only the money out of the church treasury to help Christians. And he went in, I have his charts. I have his material. Did one of the finest jobs showing, listen, we have not only the responsibility for members of the church, we have responsibilities for people who are not members of the church. If I'm looking at the scriptures carefully, and I've tried to do this over the years, if I'm looking at the scriptures carefully, the gospel is not only for Christians, it's for non-Christians. It is. We spend money for helping to spread the gospel not only to members of the church and rooting them and teaching them, but we are non-members of the church. Or else we won't have any members of the church. Is that right or wrong? Brother Charles, help me out here.
That passage in Galatians is not written to just an individual to do good to all men. It's written to congregations. It's written to groups of Christians to help others that are in need. And I was listening to a debate with Brother Woods and Guy Woods, and I can't remember the other fellow's name. And Brother Woods was debating the guy that held that you don't use church funds to help non-Christians, and he followed the logic through. He says, if somebody brings a baby and leaves them at the doorstep, you got to let the baby sit there and die. Is that what a Christian would do?
That brought by a non-member of the church.
Brought by a non-member of the church.
Right.
If you're not going to help non-members, then you just have to let the baby just cry till it dies, I guess. Just shows the foolishness of the argument.
I want to know how many people were members of the church when Jesus fed the 4,000 and the 5,000. Yes, sir.
Well, I was just going to say that for a non-member, until they see that the member of the church cares, and if they need help, but they see that the member of the church cares, they will be interested in learning the gospel. If they see that that member really doesn't care for them or about them, it's going to be difficult for that member to teach them.
Good. I think that the school policies, and Brother Frank heads this up much better than I could ever think about doing, is that they do have school lunches or breakfasts for people, for kids, so they can get something in their stomach so they can think. A hungry stomach is very difficult to take. Brother Frank, is that correct? Yeah. Now let me say this. If a group of brethren want to practice that, not helping non-members of the church, that's them. Don't force it on me or any other member of the church. I see Brother Frank Long has something to say.
No, it's a question.
Oh, no, I don't need your questions.
When it comes to helping those in need,
Yes.
what's the difference between the church funds and my funds?
So, to say that one more time.
When it comes to helping those in need, whether they be out of the church or in the church, members of the church. What is the difference between the church funds and my funds?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a very good one. That would make it very difficult. No what? No what? There's no difference?
There is a difference.
Oh.
Once you turn it over to the eldership, you contributed as we're told to do. You no longer have control of that. That's the decision of elders or the man, whoever is in charge of dealing with that. You've done your part, you've contributed. You can, on your own, on your own, we've taken people out to eat, we've had them to our home, we give them food, you help people as you are able.
Okay.
But when we get down to, I mean, it's a legalistic, split words and
Whoa.
sentences, and we have to be careful,
Good point. We do.
because then we start putting up fences and drawing lines and saying, you, me, you're wrong, I'm right, I'm wrong, you're right. I mean,
Well,
we have to be careful. That's,
I opened the barn door, didn't I? Oh, it was Frank. Oh, Frank. Oh, Frank. Thank you. You saved me. You saved me. Okay. Yes, Brother Cossack.
Well, one of the verses that definitely brings to bear on this whole situation is 1 Timothy 5,
Okay.
which says, honor widows that are widows indeed. But if any widow has children or nephews, let them first show piety at home and to requite their parents. In other words, take care of them.
Okay.
For that is good and acceptable before God.
Okay.
So in other words, before you help a widow, if she's got children,
Okay.
the children are to help them first.
Well, I agree with that. I do.
Now,
I
I'm
do.
not saying they will.
That's right. That's exactly right. I agree with that 100%. But sometimes children fail or refuse their obligation. So what's going to happen to the widow who children doesn't help? It falls on the church. That's true. That's part of it. But if they fail to do it, and more are neglecting what they're supposed to do in helping their parents. That's right. Brother Scott had something. I'm going to listen carefully this time, Brother Scott.
Well, I had thought about this earlier. When Jesus was in Bethany and the lady came in and anointed him, the disciples got really upset, Judas especially, but all of them did, because that was happening. He said, well, this could have been sold for $300. We could have given it to the poor. And Jesus said, the poor you will have with you always. Which poor was he talking about? Members of the church? He was talking about all the poor. They're there, and you can help them when you can. And it's interesting that in this passage right here, it's James, Cephas, or Peter, and John, who were all present that day, who specifically told Paul to help the poor.
Didn't specify.
They said they desired only that we should remember the poor. And that was a specific request that they made of him.
So he didn't specify.
I'm sorry?
They didn't specify.
They requested.
Okay, they still didn't specify.
Okay. But it was something that they reminded them to do. Reminded him to do.
Listen, if there are people out there, members of the church, who don't want to help the church, help poor, listen, that's up to them.
Right.
But I really believe that we should help people who have need. And I know the eldership here has done that. Am I wrong? We've helped people who are not members of the church. We help more people that are members of the church, and we have a special obligation to the church, but we have obligation to everybody. Well, I don't know how I got off on this, but I think we needed to talk about it. Right or wrong? I didn't intend to. I'll just tell you that. Yes, ma'am.